Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Trustcast Show. And we're happy to have on with us Kim Val Valldejuli. Did I get that right?
You did.
Yeah. All right, Kim
Absolutely right.
Valldejuli, and she's an art psychotherapist, and we're going to get into that. So, Kim is so welcome to the show, Kim.
Thank you for having me.
So, Kim is a Barbad. Screwed this up before. Barbadian,
Barbadian.
Barbadian-born art psychotherapist who trained in the UK, co-founded an art therapy association in Trinidad and Tobago, and now works as a psychiatric hospital in Fredericksburg, Virginia, while pursuing her PhD at Drexel. She's a published researcher, an award-winning artist, and the creator of a new framework for Afro-Caribbean art therapy. So you started as a visual artist and art teacher in Barbados and then made a sharp left turn into psychotherapy. What made you decide to merge those two worlds?
I really enjoyed my time teaching art. I was a secondary school art teacher, so we went all the way up to exams. I had at the school that I was teaching at, I had founded an art club, and I had taken the kids on an art trip excursion to Miami. And in all of this, I realized that I had developed a lot of good relationships with the students. So the art room had become a little bit of a therapy community space. So a lot of the young people, they would come into the art room, and when they were having challenges at home or when different things were going on in their lives, they would come into the art room. We would create art and we would talk. And I just started to feel like they could be more. There could be more to using the art, and I felt like that more involved actually being able to work therapeutically as opposed to just teaching. I was always taught that teachers were kind of mentors in a way, a little more than just there to educate, but there to offer other types of support. But within upcoming frames, it didn't feel like it would have been as relevant. So I wanted a profession that really merged my two passions, which was engaging with the children and really trying to help support them, and art. Yeah.
So a lot of people hear art therapy and they immediately think for kids or artists, or what do you tell them?
Oh, I say no skill required. Because the first thing I always hear is I cannot draw, and or I'm not good at art. And I think it's really challenging to kind of get rid of those stigmas about art and engaging with art. But what I try to tell people is like you don't need to be an artist to do art therapy. It's about expression. So I say any way that feels relevant to you. If you want to like make something and mash it up, or like tear up strips of paper and stick them on a piece of paper, and that's how you feel, that is also okay. So I think the biggest thing for me throughout my career is trying to help people to re-engage with their creative play side, and let go a bit of that adult judgment side.
So tell me what's actually happening in a session. Walk me through the first time somebody sits down with you the first time.
Mhm. So usually my first session is always an assessment session. So I have a conversation like, why are you here? What are the things that brought you to art therapy, and how do you think I can help? And the reason um, I do this is to kind of establish a baseline, so I know what goals we are working on within the therapeutic relationship. I also share contract, work on contract, like thinking about things like what happens if you can't make it when you're not on time, and how do we negotiate those things to establish good boundaries within the space. And then I do a art therapy assessment. Um, Not like a specific assessment, but I think it really depends on the client after we have that chat about why they're here or what they need from me. I usually engage in some kind of arts practice with them. And then at the end of the arts practice, we have a little bit of a chat slash feedback. With children, it's two things. I usually speak to the parents also, and I let them know that I am going to speak to their parents. And so, because usually I like to work in collaboration with the parents and the children, when the children are under the age of consent. So
So,
yeah, go ahead.
well, no, I was just thinking. It occurs to me that you have the sit down with somebody who, and you start talking about art therapy, but how does somebody even get to know that art therapy exists? I mean, I think of when I think of art therapy inside my own head, I think of an inpatient setting. So because that's where you're in a psychiatric hospital, and my mother was in a psychiatric hospital for a time, and that was one of the things that they did. This is many decades ago. Um, but that they had art therapy to kind of get their mind going in another direction. But how do not all your patients are actually inpatients, right? You do a lot of outpatient type of work. So how does somebody find out that you even exist, or how does someone else say, "Hey, you should really go see this art therapist"?
So, when I was in Trinidad, we had a referral system, which worked through the office that I was working in, which was a practice that had several clinicians, so psychologists, psychiatrists. So we kind of worked together. So if they did an assessment for a child and they felt like they could benefit from art therapy, they would refer them on to me. Now, how I get referrals is really through recommendations. So clients that I have had, sometimes they come across people who need support, and they might message me and they might say, "Kim, do you have space? I want to give somebody your number because I think they need some support." And even in my practice, my private practice, the majority of referrals outside of the clinic came from personal referrals for people who had engaged with me at some point in time and referred to a friend.
So, tell me a story about, without revealing anybody's, personal information, but tell me a story about someone who has experienced art therapy with you and something and had a result.
Oh wow. I have so many stories, but I guess I can
People love
start
to hear the actual stories, like a real person.
a
I mean,
real
it's just our
person.
emotional makeup. Yes.
Yes, I know people like stories, but one, I think I will go back to my practice in the UK. I actually worked in with a charity at the time, working in schools, and we had therapeutic practice based in the schools, and so we got our referrals through the school systems, the special education needs coordinators, and I got a referral from my supervisor at the time. She had gone to a school and she had seen a little boy. He was, I think, at the time 10 years old. And he had like a history of trauma. His mom had died. When he was 9, she was ill. She had cancer, and his dad was not around, so he was cared for by his siblings, and he was having some behavioral challenges at the time, so the siblings were very stressed and they didn't know if
Hmm.
they wanted to keep caring for him. So he was a little in limbo. So how that presented within the school environment was a lot of challenging behavior. He couldn't sit in classes. He just wouldn't do anything. And one of the supervisors from the company had gone to the school to make a visit. They didn't have a service at the time, but they were contemplating having a service there. And she saw this little boy and she messaged me and she said, I have the perfect client for you. Because when she saw him, he was like hiding under the desk in the reception area. He wasn't in class,
Hmm.
right? Um, he became my first client at school. And initially, we had all the same behavioral challenges. Showing up was difficult for him. But within the space, he was very expressive. He would make lots of art. Sometimes he would just want to sit. Our room in the school was decorated. So we had a little tree drawn on the wall, which was kind of like a library corner with some books. And
Hmm.
he would make these like dramatic play, and he would ask me to come and sit with him and read with him under the tree. So over the course of a year, we really built up a good therapeutic relationship. And what happened was I also started to work with him to build his outside resources. I work with the family. So just in terms of the stability of his home environment, because within our therapeutic relationship, what I realized is I was doing a lot of mothering. And that is a part of really kind of rebuilding a little bit of what he had been missing and kind of helping him to cope with the grief of losing his mom.
Hmm.
So over time, I got him a mentor, someone who would come to the school and meet with him. And they did like football together, they did different things. And so, gradually, over the process of a year, by the time I was leaving that school, he was sitting in classes, he was getting his work done. And he was functioning, and I felt really happy. I don't know how else to explain it. I was really happy about it because he was really struggling with functioning in general. Like the teachers were very they were thrilled because they didn't have as many challenges with him, and he wasn't always put out of the classes because of his behavior. So some of the key things that he gained really was, well, I would say the key thing was being able to regulate his emotions a lot better and being able to ground himself when he felt overwhelmed with those feelings.
So it sounds like that in that instance, that was a lot more than just art therapy.
I think a lot of times we separate therapy, but I always, especially now, and this is a little bit about what my research is focusing on, which is traditional healing. I think in the context of the work we do, sometimes it's hard to um, separate the individual from the societies or the systems in which they operate. So we cannot just treat the child. We have to work on the other systemic things which are involved with the child's system so that the child gets the full support so they can function. So we can work on things like emotional regulation and understanding feelings and things like that within the therapeutic context. But still, even if you're thinking about Maslow's hierarchy, if he does not have a safe place to stay, it's still going to be
Hmm.
a challenge. So we have to look at everything. And for me, that is therapy. Therapy exists not only within the clinic but outside of the clinic.
So your patients, what percentage of them are um, juveniles versus adults?
Right now, because I'm working mostly in the hospital, I would say the majority, 90% are adults. In the hospital, we only have one adolescent unit. All the rest are adult units. All my private clients, well, not all of them, but majority of my private clients were adolescent children, adolescents. But when I started my doctorate, I said, okay, can you give me a break? I had to let go some of my clients so I would have time to, do some work to focus.
So in hospitalization, how does your therapy work for people who are inpatient? So is most of your patient population now inpatient?
It's a mixture. So I work on inpatient and outpatient programs. So we have a partial hospitalization program, and we also have an intensive outpatient program, which works mainly with addiction. Um, so I do mostly inpatient groups, but I also do groups on the outpatient as well. Most of my inpatient groups are organized based on need. So each unit has a different level of acuity. So with the more acute units, I tend to do less processing and more process. So we focus more a lot about materials and feelings and expressions. So I take a lot of tactile things over there, maybe a lot of watercolor painting, whatever I can take on the acute units. Um, Model Magic has been a big hit on the inpatient and outpatient as well. But I take a lot of
Model magic, did you say?
yeah, yeah, Model Magic. It's like clay, but people say Play-Doh, but it's more rubbery and it's air dry and it comes in all these wonderful colors. So people like sometimes I have patients ask me for it. They're like, "Oh, can I have some of that Model Magic thing?" And sometimes they just make like stress balls out of it, or they might make like I've seen people make a whole planet system or little ducks, animals, and just different things. So usually, I mean, and I find it's really interesting for me too sometimes because, I sit on the team's meeting every morning and people say, "Oh, these patients, they're very difficult, they're this and they're that." And I've had patients on the acute unit who just would ask when I'm coming, and they would come to every art session I do. They would sit peacefully and create art. And I value the process of art for that, being able to support them with their emotional regulation. On the outpatient,
So is there? Go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead.
I want to go ahead.
Oh, no,
Well, I
no.
was
I
just
think
going to
on
ask
the
you.
outpatient, I was saying on the outpatient, I
You
do more
first.
processing. Yeah, no, I do more processing on
So,
the outpatient. That's it.
what do you mean more processing?
So, like, we would focus on things like coping skills. So I do sometimes activities like the bridge story, which focuses on perhaps things that you're looking to overcome or work out your challenges or what your strengths, your coping mechanisms, your skills, um, things like that. I do sometimes on the inpatient, but it really depends on the acuity of the people.
So, what's the biggest fear that patients have walking into art therapy? But art doesn't sound like art therapy is the only thing that you do. So, I'll just say, put it in the just therapy in general. What's the biggest fear they have walking in?
So what a lot of people say when they come to art therapy is I cannot draw. That's the first thing people tell me. I cannot draw or I'm not good at art. And I think the fear is around judgment because most of the time with a lot of these people that tell me that when we are talking about so within the outpatients we do some processing after the activity so people talk about the meanings behind their work. And when people present their work, a lot of times it comes with a disclaimer. Don't look at it. It looks horrible. I know it looks like it's done by a 2-year old. It's terrible. Like people do those disclaimers before they present their work. So I think for me, it feels like the biggest fear is that people will judge you or say you're not good enough or it's not good enough. So that's really it.
So can art therapy actually make things worse? Are there some people who shouldn't be doing art therapy?
I haven't encountered it. I have not encountered it. Um, but what I would say is that I have had clients who are more inclined towards movement or more inclined towards music, and sometimes that feels like a more natural expression for them. So I I f- I think it really depends on the client and what they want. I haven't experienced it not being good for anybody. We were all
Okay.
artists as kids.
So when you in your private practice, I know in inpatient that they have groups, but do you have in your private practice you have groups, classes or anything like that for people, or is it all one on one?
All one-on-one, all individual at the moment.
So at the moment, so is that something you're thinking about as you move forward? I know you only have so much time to go around right now, especially while you're working on your PhD.
Yeah, so I haven't really been focusing on my private practice right now, as I said, because of the PhD, but hopefully once I complete my PhD, I'll be able to focus more on my private practice and building that back up. But no, I at the moment no groups and I take very
Okay.
limited clients. Mhm.
So you've done research on art therapy with veterans dealing with PTSD and traumatic brain
Mhm.
injury. What does this approach offer that traditional talk therapy can't?
Ooh. Yeah, so sometimes it's really hard to frame traumatic experiences into words. And also the, how do you say, the intensity of the feeling is difficult to articulate into words, especially with people who suffer from PTSD and definitely a lot of veterans who have witnessed a lot of trauma. I think that art offers a little distance from it. Sometimes I don't know if you've ever noticed this, like when you're talking about something that is traumatic, you almost re-experience it right away because you are
Mhm.
talking about it. But art offers you that little distance, you know. Sometimes people, when they're not yet ready to do that processing, they might not talk about it, but they might be creating an image, right? And that image is the language. So I think for me, the benefits are really like sometimes pre-verbal trauma, like sometimes people who have experienced early childhood trauma is super good for them because they just don't have the words for it, right? And then when words are difficult or when actually accessing that trauma through words is difficult, it provides a good distance for you to be able to process that trauma.
So, if is this something that art therapy in general that someone could self-administer? Let's say someone's been through some sort of a trauma and they're, either physical, emotional, psychological. Um, is um, is this something that you could do on your own that would help you to deal with those issues? I know a lot of people just won't, but is there are there courses out there that can self-administer art therapy, or do you recommend for somebody so you when they leave the hospital or they leave your practice, do you give them other exercises that they can do at home to help them emotionally separate themselves from the trauma or just deal with the trauma?
So, uh, first thing is art is therapeutic, period. So when the patients often leave, sometimes they ask me like, where can I buy these materials? I really want to do this at home just to relax or regulate. And I always give them resources. In terms of trauma, that's a different thing altogether. It's like it's hard to find a metaphor for it, but um, you can engage in arts practice and it can help you to relate or regulate. But when it comes to processing trauma or working through trauma, I think you should always seek the help of a professional. The reason being is sometimes when we are in that state, it is hard to think clearly. It's hard to process
Hmm.
things um, clearly, and you don't have that feedback. And this is one of the issues with trauma and PTSD is sometimes people see things different from how they really are, and there's no sense of reality checking. And we get a lot of that in the outpatient. You have patients who come and they have all these experiences, and their narrative is one which is not necessarily the reality of what their situation is. So you develop all of these internal narratives. Um, if you are doing this on your own, often you don't have anybody to check back with in terms of these personal narratives that you've developed. You don't have that person to kind of feedback, okay, this is what is happening, or this is what I see. What do you think about that? Or it's not causing you to have that sense of processing from the outside. And one of the things that I always think about too is I don't know if you know about this, the Johari window is those things that you know about yourself and the things that other people know about you, and that little unknown area. So I feel like it's so
Hmm.
important to have like that external voice sometimes who can give you like a more objective perspective. And that's the to me the usefulness of having a therapist or a therapeutic guide, because a lot of times you might go off into a direction that might not necessarily be useful on your own.
So if someone is out there, so usually at this show, I'm talking to somebody who's trying to or wants to promote their business and their practice, but you really don't because you're often doing the inpatient and working on your PhD, and you don't really have room for additional patients. So somebody sees the value in what you're talking about here. What would you suggest for them to maybe look at exploring art therapy?
Yeah, so I think art therapy is an amazing profession. There are loads of art therapists out there who are really good at what they do. Um, and also there are lots of community-based art therapy groups. And there is now a lot of discussion about social prescribing. I mean, I'm not promoting myself at this moment because of all those things you mentioned, but
Hmm.
I will always promote the value of art therapy as a profession that is not only useful for severe trauma, but just useful for emotional regulation and just regulating yourself when things get overwhelming, you know.
So, do you think art therapy is good for not just for people who've gone through stress and so forth, for people who are under stress. So we have a lot of high stress, or interview a lot of high stress individuals. I don't mean that they're high stress, but their positions that they have, they're running, high value companies or
Mhm.
practices, that they're always under stress at work because they have so much responsibility and so many things
Mhm.
going on. And how would someone like a professional, have you had any professionals who've taken advantage of your services in the past, or do you have any story about that kind of, because we have our audience is primarily professionals
Mhm.
to this podcast.
Yes. So, in Trinidad, I used to do a lot of company company groups. So for Mental Health Awareness Day and things like that. And what I would do is at the Mental Health Awareness Day, I would set up like a art therapy kind of station where professionals can come and like engage with art therapy practices, you know? Um,
Hmm.
I think within company context, and I always advocate for my own area as well. Recently, we did a exhibition called The Human Thread, and what I talked about with our group of professionals was how mental health impacts us as providers, as well as not only the patients, and being able to have that space as providers to actually express our own feelings about mental health. And we created a mural together. So there's opportunities for professionals to engage in it. In addition, there's a lot of company programs. I've seen some research recently about doctors in the NHS, where they used art therapy, and it was proven that they had better outcomes. Doctors, they were more relaxed and that they were better supported when they engaged in art therapy throughout in the hospital. So there's different approaches, but I think when you have groups of people who are under a lot of stress, group engagement or having group art therapy sessions can be really useful because it gives people the opportunity to come together, have a shared understanding, but also work on shared solutions together and also understand how different people are feeling, because in a lot of company environments we have limited understanding of how other people may function or feel within our settings. And art therapy is a good way to bring awareness to that.
So, what I'm hearing is the potential for something like this within meetings, even within a company, to help, bring out the inner feelings of people and really develop a cohesion in the group.
Hmm. Absolutely. Hmm.
Okay, so thanks for coming. You're a little bit of an unusual guest for our podcast, and I think it's great to spread our wings and talk to different people. So I appreciate you coming on the show.
Yes, I know. I thought, well, I'm not really like a lawyer or anyone like that. So, but art therapy is amazing.
It's Thanks so much for coming on, Kim. I really appreciate it. And if somebody did want to get in touch with you, what would be the way that they would do that?
I'm on LinkedIn, and your just the way your colleague reached out, it's very easy to find me. And on most of my published articles, there is contact information there. Through Drexel, I can be contacted as well. So, and
Okay,
it's
thanks a lot.